Hope you are doing good practice. So the hopefully it will be live in a couple of minutes. So today we are going to understand the most important topic in JavaScript, the scope chain. Okay, in the last session we understand what is scope little bit, and today we are going to understand what is a scope chain. So if you join the live, you can just ping me here. Definitely, I will reply on that because it's really 5:30 early in the morning. Maybe it's very difficult to join the live, I know. But yeah, we can jump into the topic. So the scope chain. Okay, yesterday we understand the scope. Okay, simple. We understand there are so far we understand there are two kinds of scopes. One is global scope, and another one is a local scope. And one more important thing is we should learn that in next session, that is a block scope. Okay, before going to block scope, we should understand what is a scope chain. What is a scope chain? Okay, in the last session we understand if you declare any variable in a global scope, you can access from anywhere in the program. But if you declare anything in local, you can access only in local. You can't access outside. So simple. I will just simply I will show you one simple diagram here for understanding purpose. Suppose this is the global scope. For example, I'm saying so this is a function scope. Suppose there are if you have two functions, and suppose if you have any data in the global scope, like in this black area, you can access from anywhere. Okay, suppose if you have this is the local scope, and this is the local scope of a different function. So here you can't access the variables or functions or any information from local scope to global scope, but global is a parent of this function scope, so that these functions can access global information, but global scope cannot access the local information of that functions. Okay, it's a simple definition. So of course, I think if you already watched the previous video, you got the clarity. Otherwise, please go and watch that video. So today we are going to understand what is a scope chain. What is a scope chain? So here for that I'm just taking another example. So first of all, I'm just writing the var a is equal to 10. Suppose you know, right? This is in global scope because if you write anything in function, it will be a local scope. If you write anything in the block, it will be a block scope. Okay, so far we didn't discuss about the block scope much. So right now just focus on global and local and we can understand the scope chain easily. It's not a deal. So, and I'm writing one function called a parent. Okay, function called a parent. So here I'm declaring another variable where a b is equal to 100. Okay, where b is equal to 100, and so now if you understand the yesterday's session, that you can access you can access you can access b here because this is inside the function body and you are trying to access it, so that it's a local scope. You don't have any problem. And here also you can access variable a. Okay, even though this variable a you have defined in the global scope, you can access inside the function because this global scope is a parent of this function called parent, so that you can access it. So and here if I try to do the same thing, suppose for uh, easiness I'm just changing the order. so that you don't have any problem here, because a is a global variable but you can access in the function. Okay, no problem, no problem. Okay, and b is anyway it's a local variable to that function. Okay, local variable to that parent function only, so no problem for us. Okay, this is a simple one. And now if I try to access these variables one more time, like console.log a, console.log a, we don't have any problem because this statement is executing in global scope, like global execution context, so that you can access variables from global scope easily. So this is in global scope, so that you don't have any problem. Okay, any problem. But whenever you try to access the variable b outside, so right now this line 34 is executing in the global execution context. Okay, whenever you are in global execution context, you can't access local variables information, because you know, right, once you invoke this function, it will it will generate an execution context, and once the task is done, it will pop out from the call stack, so that by the time you are executing this line number 36, this function execution context is also gone from the memory, and the information or the memory allocated for that function is also gone from the memory, so that you can't find it, because you don't have access to take information from functions from global scope. So this B right now, this is in the local scope, right? Local scope of a parent function. So you can't find it because you don't have access. Even though if it is available, you can't access it. But you know, right? Once you come out of this parent, once you invoke the function, it will allocate the memory for local variables. Once you complete that function, automatically it will erase and it will remove the memory from the call stack and everywhere, so that information is not available. So here you can say that for b you can't find that, so that it will display information as b is not defined. B is not defined. Okay, this is what we have understood from yesterday's session. So here we should understand one more thing. Undefined is different. Undefined is different, and not defined is different completely. So undefined means you are able to access the variable, but you didn't initialize any value, so that is undefined. Not defined means you don't have a variable in that scope. In that situation, it will display not defined. Suppose, for example, I'm taking two examples here, simple, where the b where b sorry, already b is there, so I'm just taking var c. So here, if you try to access this variable console.log c, see, you know that it will give a undefined, right? It will give a result as undefined. So undefined is not an error. Undefined is not an error. We know that if you don't initialize the value, by default in the memory allocation phase, C value will be undefined. So that here you will get the value undefined. This is a valid information. There is no error. Okay. But suppose we don't have a variable called D. You didn't initialize, you didn't declare any variable. So, but still you are trying like this. Okay. Console.log D. So whenever you are trying to get some information which is not available in that scope, then it will say that D is not defined. Defined. Hope you understand the difference between undefined and not defined. So undefined means the variable is there in that scope, but the value is not initialized, so that by default value is undefined. But D, when it comes to the D, the variable is not declared anywhere. So if you see from line number 18 to, is it 44, you didn't declare any variable with the name D. So at the time, if you try to access, suppose if you see you are trying to access like a triple X is not there. At the time, it will give a not defined. If you try to access any information like hello, so this identifier, this variable is not defined, so that you will get a not defined error. So is what you should understand before jumping into the topic called the scope chain. This is the most important topic in JavaScript. I can say this is like, if you consider 10 topics in JavaScript are most important, so this is one of that. So from this topic, in interview they can ask 100 different questions. So please focus and just watch it, understand it properly. So now I'm just changing the code in some different way. So I'm writing one more time. So to understand scope chain, we should take a different example. Now it will be more interesting. So I'm writing some variable. Again, I'm declaring a variable where a is equal to 10. So, and for this example, I will show you how it is executing in execution, like in the memory, also in the browser. So where a I'm declaring a function called parent. Okay, here I'm declaring another variable simple where b is equal to triple two. Okay, and here I'm doing like console.log of b. We don't have any problem. So now, okay, the first we can draw the diagram for this, and then we can change the example. So what I'm going to right now, I'm going to declare one more function called child. Okay, so child. Here I will declare where a c is equal to triple three. Okay, triple three. So in this situation, so again I will try to access A and B and C from this child. So let's see how it will. Okay, console dot log. Okay, A and console dot log B and console dot log C. So if you understand, so A is in a global scope so that anyone can access. So any function can access. Maybe if you're beginner, definitely you will get confusion that Raghu, can you write a function inside another function? Yes, in JavaScript you can write. Okay, you can write a function inside a function. Even you can write one more function inside of this function. Even you can declare two, three functions inside another function like child2. Okay, that's why JavaScript is different. JavaScript is something difficult if you don't learn properly. So don't worry. Yes, we can define a function inside another function. So first of all, we can complete understanding of this code, then we can draw this one also. Most important, please try to focus on it. So so where a is equal to 10, function parent, and simple, we have a variable b inside of that and console.log b. So let's see what will happen whenever you give a JavaScript code to the JavaScript engine, this code to the JavaScript engine, immediately it will create a global execution context. So I'm not drawing a call memory stack and memory heap. Hopefully, you can imagine what's happening inside of that. So right now we can focus on this one completely. Okay, okay, no problem. So it will create a global execution context. Inside of that, we have a window, and in, in the right now we are in global execution context and phase one. Okay, phase one. The phase one, what will happen? It will allocate the memory, right? So just observe the code. We have two things, two declarations. One is var a, another one is a function called a parent. Simple. So that it will allocate the memory for that. So a, initially the value is undefined in the memory allocation phase. So in the shortcut, I'm just doing UND, and the function called a parent. We know that it is a reference type function is a different. So if you declare a function with this syntax in the sorry, in the memory allocation phase itself, it will allocate the memory in the heap, and it will find the reference through the memory stack. So you will get the function definition. So here I'm writing the function definition, whatever you define, whatever we define. So the phase one is completed. Okay, phase one is completed. I hope you can easily understand what I'm trying to say. So in the phase two of global execution context, in the phase two of a global execution context, 1 minute, we need to invoke this function. We need to invoke the function. So here in the phase two, again, first it will come to the line number one, like 25, like var a is equal to 10. So in the phase two, it will allocate the memory in the memory stack. So the value of a will become 10. Value of a will become 10. Awesome. And what you're doing, you are trying to invoke the function, because this is the also function definition, nothing to do in the execution phase. So now you are invoking the function called parent. So now you can easily guess what is going to happen. So it is going to define one separate a new execution context. This is only for a function called parent. So that you can define here, this is execution context for function called a parent. Okay, parent. Whenever you invoke the function, whenever it is start executing the function, so observe carefully. Even I will show you the same thing in the browser itself. This control goes to the execution context of that parent. Okay, control goes to the execution context of the parent. Whenever you are giving control to the another execution context, understand properly here, it will, so this is very 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 important what I am trying to say here. It will take a copy, it will take a copy of this window object. It will take a copy of a window object, and it will give to this execution context. So right now I'm not able to fit this here. Let me try to shrink it. So just imagine this is the window object. So whenever you are creating execution context, it will automatically give a reference. Okay, so I will show in the browser. Already I think yesterday I have shown it. So this is the local object. This is the local memory. This is the local memory. So you have already got the access to a window object. So I'm just for just managing the space, I'm just putting here. So that means you can, this local variable can access the information from the global variable, because whenever it is creating execution context, in automatically the control will go to the execution context, and it will allocate the memory for the local. That is second thing. And this is the most important. If you want to understand what is scope chain, you should understand this. So whenever it is created execution context, because you are invoking that function from this parent, right, it will give all the assets whatever this parent have. This parent means the global execution context have, it will hand over to this variable. Suppose if you see your grandfather has given some assets to your father, and father will give some assets to you, right, automatically. So that's indirectly it will happen, you don't need to demand for them for that. So that's responsibility of the parents. So in here also, whenever we are creating an execution context for any function which is defined in a global execution context, automatically it will hand over, it will give a copy of all the information from that execution context to this new execution context that is there here. So you can, even you can draw it some yellow color or something, that is a reference. Okay, I will tell you a few more interesting terminology in JavaScript once we understand this concept. So here it has created an execution context. Okay, execution context. And again, we need to follow two phases. Phase right now, phase one, in again execution context. In the phase one of execution context, what will happen here? Right now you have only one variable. Okay, I just commented this. So if you comment it, it is not going to execute that. So it will consider only one, these two lines. So here var b is equal to triple two. So and next one is a console.log. So here one variable declaration is there, so that is called a b. So in the phase one, b value is also undefined, right? And we have only one thing, so no problem, this is done. And then it will go to the phase two of phase two means execution phase. Execution phase. And right now this execution phase is pointing to this function, this arrow function. This arrow is there, right? So it will pointing to this parent. So what it will do, console.log b. So right now you are in the local scope in this execution context only, and if you try to access b, you can access easily, right? You can access easily. So console.log of b, you will get the, okay. And in a sorry, in the execution phase, what will happen first, it will initialize the value as 222. Initialize the value with the 222, right? In the execution phase, first it will happen, the first it will happen, so triple two. Okay, now whenever you try to execute console.log of b inside this execution context, you don't have any problem, you can access b easily, so that you will get the output in the console triple two. Okay, easily. Now suppose in case if I try to access console.log console.log of a from, because this a is declared in the global execution context, but still you are trying to access that variable inside the function, inside the separate execution context, inside that private execution context, still you can access it, because that information, that this global execution context is there, the whole information is there in the window object. But whenever you create an execution context, it has given a copy to you. This is the copy, right? This is the copy. You got all the information from your parent. Because if you see, the a is there here, a value 10 here, right now, that is also in your scope only, right? Your scope only, you're not going out, because you got the information from your parent, you got the copy of that, so that you don't have any problem to access it. So if you execute console.log a, you will get the output as 10. You don't get any error, because You got this local execution context, got the access, got the reference to this object already whenever it is created. So this is called a lexical environment. Okay, and we can say one step of a scope chain means if you can't find a variable or a function inside this function scope, what it is doing immediately, it is going and searching in this parent scope, right? This is the parent scope, global execution context. This is came from the parent, right? So you are able to find that information from your parent one level extra, one level up. So that is called, that's the beginning of the scope chain. So you are, if you don't find information here, indirectly what is happening, indirectly what is happening, if you don't find variable here, indirectly you are going and you are taking information from your parent. But how it is happening? Actually it is not going from this place to this place. Okay, already you got the information here. You no need to go, you no need to go to your parent home. Already your father has given everything to you, so you no need to worry about anything. Father has given everything to you, so you can just take that information and you can utilize it. That's it. So what is that? This is called lexical environment. So this is a local scope. If you don't find any variable inside that, first it will check in the local scope, and if it is not able to find that variable, immediately it will go and find that information which has given by his parent. That is called lexical scope. So we got an extra thing, right? That is called extra thing, that lexical environment. So if, of course, I will explain in different shades in next the few minutes of discussion. Don't worry. Right now, we got another word, another new jargon, that is called lexical environment or lexical scope. Okay, you can call lexical environment or lexical scope. Okay, this is given by a parent. Suppose you got the job, you're getting the salary, but indirectly your father, suppose if your father has 10 acres, so indirectly you got 10 acres, right? So from your father, so what is your assets now? 10 acres plus your salary. S- okay, from where your father got that 10 acres? Maybe he has purchased 4 to 5 acres, maybe he got 5 to 6 acres from his father. So that is called scope chain. So if you don't have money, you can take from your father. If your father also don't have a money, he can take from his father. But this is not happen in a reverse order. So if your grandfather don't have a money, you don't have a chance to ask his son. If your father don't have a money, he can't access your money directly from your account. So the scope chain is coming going from child, a parent, and grandparent. So it's not valid from the reverse order. So information will come from reverse order, access will come, you can access from the reverse order. So of course that's what we are going to learn now. So if you see, this is a lexical environment. So you can see, I want to just put some yellow color inside of that. So this is the lexical environment, right? I hope you like it. If you understand, otherwise just wait, we can take few more example to understand it. So this is not that much easy thing. So now the same thing we can see in the browser, we can check in the browser, then only it's it is more interesting. The same thing, right click. So I'm just refreshing one more time, so we understand the scope chain. So I'm just trying to debug. So if you see, right now nothing is there in the call stack and the scope. Whenever you try to debug it, so whenever in the first memory allocation phase of global execution context is done. So if you see in the call stack anonymous, this is the global execution context. And right now this arrow mark is pointing to global execution context. Right now means, that means you are in global execution context. You are executing this statement in global execution context. So that this, for this statement, what is the scope? So we are in global scope. we have a variable a, still it is undefined because only phase 1 is completed. Now we are in phase 2. So if I execute this one, and even you have a function definition for parent also. If you just scroll down somewhere, alphabetical order, a b c d e f g. Okay, parent. So you see you have the function definition here, no problem. So memory allocation phase is completed successfully. Now we are executing the code. So a is equal to 10. So then if you can cross check, a value is 10. Okay. Now right now you are executing the code at line number 40. So understand here properly. You are invoking parent, a function called parent from global execution context. So whenever you invoke that function, it will create execution context. It will create a new execution context. Observe carefully, it will come whenever I just execute this, you will get another execution context on top of this anonymous with a name called parent. That is a local execution context for that function, and it will create another scope. It will create another scope called local scope, and it will allocate the memory for those local variable called b. And one more thing we discussed, what it will do whenever it will create an execution context, uh, it will give a reference, or it will give a copy of your information whatever you have in that global scope to the parent a function also. So this we can see now. So three things we should observe. One thing, it will create an execution context on this call stack, like anonymous execution global execution context on top of that, and then it will create another scope called local scope, and it will allocate the memory for b. The b value will be undefined in the first phase. And one extra thing, to understand a lexical scope. What is the lexical scope? Whenever you execute a function from any scope, okay, whatever the information is there, it will give it to you as a reference. So if you see, I'm just executing that, the boom. So if you see, the first thing, yes, first step, what you need to observe here, you should able to see one execution context with a name called parent, and the control goes from global execution context to that local execution context of that function called parent. So if you see, you can observe easily that blue tick, so which I have explained here. This blue tick has come from this global execution context to this context, right? And what is the second thing we need to observe? You got another extra scope that is called local scope. Okay, local scope. And observe carefully, in that local scope, what we are saying, lexical environment, lexical scope. So you got some special key that is called this and colon window. So what it is? What it is? It is exactly what is there in global scope. Everything. So what we have created, a value 10 is there. Even that function is also there called parent. Scroll down, MNOP. So, so if you see, the parent function is also there. So whatever the information, whatever the assets, whatever the money, whatever the gold, whatever it is there in global execution context, it is just hand over everything to his kid. The name is called parent, right? So now b value is undefined, and right now we are in execution phase of the parent because already memory allocation is done. So now I'm executing this. So b value is triple two, as we discussed. So here if you see, b value is triple two, and now what you are doing, now what we are doing, you are trying to access console.log of b and then console.log of a. So first we can see console.log of b. If you do console.log of b inside this function, you don't have any problem because you are in right now, it is pointing to the local execution context, and the information which is there in the local you can access directly because that's your data. So you don't have any problem. So you will get the output. And the interesting thing is, so whenever you do console.log of a, the a is declared in global scope. Actually, if you see, the a value is there in global scope. How can you access a value from local scope to global scope? How can you access from global scope? It's another scope, right? But you don't need to worry, you don't need to go to this global scope. Already you got that information here, this colon window. That means it's exactly the same information what is there in the global scope. If you see in the global scope, this is the window object, right? This is the window object. So it is handovering the whole object to you. So if you don't find a variable in your local scope, immediately you can take help from your father. So a value is 10, so that you can't find any problem here. So if you execute it, so just go and execute this console.log of a, so you will get the information called 10. So this is called one level of scope chain. Okay, this information what you are able to see here, this colon dot window, that is lexical environment. So you got the local scope, plus you got the access to your parent scope also, right? You got the whole information of your global execution context, access to your account details. At the same time, you got the access from your parents assets also. This is called a lexical environment. And the process, the access, you can access information from your parent, that is called scope chain. And now if you understand this, okay, if it is heavy, just pause the video for a few minutes and take a break for 5 minutes and just digest it and come back and watch the next 5 minutes of video also. So now I hope you guys understand. I hope you have taken a small break and you came back to understand one more level of the scope chain. So here in this parent, we have defined another function. We have defined another function called a child, and you we need to invoke it, right? Without invocation, the function is not going to execute. So whenever so I hope you guys understood up to this point. You don't have any problem. So I'm just removing this console.log statements to save some time because already you understand. So now what I'm trying to do, so we have another function. Yes, this is 100% valid code. You can define a function inside of another function. There is no doubt in that. So you can define a function inside of another function. So this is a child. Okay, now you understand up to this point. So if you have a console.log statements, here console.log of a, okay, otherwise I will put it same. So you guys understand what will happen in the execution phase of these three things. Okay, so in the memory allocation phase, previously it will allocate the value b. Of course, if you uncomment it, it will definitely execution context quickly. So in that we have a variable a, and definitely the function parent is defined already. If you just scroll down, already we have seen in last example. So now I'm just going to execute the code. So a value will become 10 here in the global execution context, and now we are invoking the function called parent. If we invoke the function, we understand that it is allocated a memory for b. So if you see, this b is a variable, and again this child is a function, right? So we have a function and the function definition is also there. Now b as triple 2, this is already we understand. And now if you try to access console.log of b, we don't have any problem because b is there in the local scope, so it will give the output. And whenever you do console.log of a, we don't have any problem because with the help text, it is indirectly hand over to the execution context. The name is called parent. So that's why you are able to see the same information. You don't have any problem. You will see the output as a 10. So now side of that parent function, we are invoking another function called child. Then what will happen? What will happen? it will create, it is not going to, because we didn't came out of that function parent. Still we are at line number 39, we are not at line number 40, we are at line number 39, so that it is not going to delete execution context for parent. It will be there, and on top of that it will create another execution context called child. observe carefully Observe carefully. Right now in the call stack, two things are there: global execution context and execution context for the parent. And if you invoke any function inside of any other function, it is not going to delete this execution context. Instead it will create another execution context on top of that. So now you will see another execution context with a name called child on top of the parent. Okay, like this, it's not going to delete, it will create another execution context on top of this execution context name is called a child, right? Okay, execution context for child, just write down somewhere, I don't have space here. And then what will happen, it will move the control from this parent to child function. Okay, and it will allocate the memory. So what is there in that C? The child C is there, so it will allocate the memory for C. It is also have a, it is also have a object, that means a local scope. Local scope, they are very interesting thing. Local scope here, it will be C, and initially that is undefined. Along with that, along with, so how, whenever you invoke this whenever you have created this execution context, you got the access to his parent, right? The window object. And at the same time, whenever you invoke the child function, whenever it has created execution context on top of this parent, again you will get all the information of your parent and your grandparent. So if you see this, you will get the information about that, because here you got the information about this parent of this execution context, that window object. Here you will get information about your parent and his parent. So you can access your parents information. Again you can access your grandparent information also. The whole information of your parent and your grandparent will come into this box with a reference. This is called lexical environment. Okay, this is called lexical environment, and don't worry, it's very simple. So now if you see, and if you, what will happen if you do console.log of C? Suppose once it executed, what is the value of C here? Triple three. So just make this value as triple three, make this value of triple three. And we are trying to do, we are trying to execute three statements, so it's already triple three. Statement console log of C. So suppose if you do console log of C, you don't have any problem, because it's, you are there in the same scope, you will get the output as triple three. And here if you try console log of B, what will happen? What will happen? You can access easily, because you got the information about your parent also. So if you don't find information of your local scope, immediately with the help of this reference, with the help of this lexical environment, with the help of this lexical scope, you can access information from your parent, immediate parent. So it will go and search about information B. Okay, if you got it, okay, you can print a value. Even if you don't get a value, still it will go and search in his grandparent. If it found, it will display the value. If it doesn't found, at the time it will say that variable is not defined. So first, if you don't have a money, first go to your father. And if your father don't have a money, he will go to his his father. If father also don't have a money, you, he will say that I don't have a money, you should purchase from, if you can take from another person. So this is called scope chain. So if you don't have a variable inside your local scope, it will go and find the information with immediate parent. Still if you can't find it, it will go on, it will go to the grandparent. So this is called a scope chain. So if you see, we can do that. So first of all, we can see what is there, what will happen if you invoke this function. So I'm going to invoke it now. You will see what we have discussed so far. So boom, So if you see, we got another execution context on top of a parent. Now you have a child, a parent, and global execution context. Okay, whenever you are understanding, imagine that this global execution context is the God, and this is a parent, this is a child. So if the parent, so if you see, and one other another important thing is for child C, you should able to, so you got this window. So again, in this dot window, you have everything, you have everything. So right now, just don't try to break your head. So here, if you see, another one is there, another new word called closure. So if you see, this is very, very important. This is the local scope. This is the local scope of, this is the local scope of child. So if you don't find any information in this local, immediately it will go and find in the parent. So this is the scope of a function called parent. So you can find a triple two there. Still, if you don't find the information with your immediate parent, then it will go and ask the window object. So this is the scope chain. So if you don't find information in the child, it will go and find information with his father. If still you don't find a variable information, it will go and find with their father. This is called scope chain. So here there is a new thing. What is a difference between the local scope and global scope? What is a lexical environment? What is scope chain? Then what is a closure? So if you understand all these things in a sequence with practice, with analysis, then only you can understand these concepts with, you should do practice multiple times. So then only it's easy. So and another new jargon is there, closure. Okay, don't worry. So global execution context, it will give all the access to you is kid through this lexical environment. Again, this also will get access to this and this with this lexical environment. So normally here also some lexical environment kind of thing. Scope chain. Scope chain means if you don't find information here, you can come, you can take from here. Still, if you don't find information here, you can take from here. That is called scope chain. Lexical scope means, lexical environment means, whenever you create a execution context, indirectly you will get access to your parent also. So if you, suppose if you are a grandchildren, indirectly you will get an access to your parent and their grandparent. So through a reference, right? That reference we can call it as a lexical scope. So I hope you guys understood. Still, if you have a confusion, don't worry. I will explain one more time. Watch this video one or two times. Still, if you have a confusion, just give a message. Definitely, I will explain in another way also. Okay, that's all for today, and see you in the next session. Okay, that will be much more interesting. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure whether anyone joined in the live. Hopefully, no one is there. This is by me only. Okay, thank you. Okay, I will just wait for 2 minutes because sometimes the recording will stop. Um, uh, we lost some information, that's why. We'll just wait for a minute and I will stop the recording. Please do practice. Please do practice. Please do practice. Otherwise, you can't learn anything. This is the most and most and most important interview question. So important topic. From this topic, they can ask n number of interview questions. Hopefully, everything is recorded properly, so I'm happily can stop the recording and